Today at Local News Only, we have council candidate Kathy Wheat for place 3. Is that not correct?
Yes, sir.
The first question was, how does Kathy Wheat feel like she has the qualifications to be a councilwoman on city council?
That's a great question. I've spent a lot of time doing marketing technology work. Excuse me. And I've worked with a lot of organizations, bringing them together, getting them to talk to each other. And then since we've moved to Colleyville, I've spent a lot of time volunteering, being involved in my kids' school, helping with the Parks and Rec board, and getting to know a lot of people in Colleyville. So I think I have an ear to the ground and the ability to really communicate with a lot of different people in Colleyville.
Okay, Kathy, tell us about your education.
Sure, I have a BA from the University of Texas in mathematics.
And how long have you been a citizen of Colleyville?
Colleyville, about 5.5 years.
And where did you relocate from?
From San Francisco.
From San Francisco.
Yes, I lived there for about a decade, but I grew up in San Antonio.
The folks are going to want to know what your activities have been in Colleyville in the past, what civic organizations, maybe what city organizations that you've interacted with. So can you give us a list of those?
Absolutely. Right when we moved here, I got involved with the Parks and Rec board. So I served about 2 years on the Colleyville Parks and Rec board, helped with the tree advisory committee and some of the other committees that are involved with that. I also had very young children when we moved. They were 2 and just not quite 1. So I was involved with the GCS Moms League for several years and served as a board member there as well. After they got a little bit older, I got involved with their schools. They're now at Glen Hope Elementary, where I have been involved with the PTA, and I'm also on the board serving as membership chair for the PTA over at Glen Hope. I do a lot of volunteering at the school.
And you're the president of your HOA?
I am the president of the HOA. I have been for I think about 4 years now. It's been a great way to get to know people.
And a member of the Colleyville Women's Club.
I was for a year, yes.
Mm-hmm. This Parkland Dedication Committee.
Sure.
What was the undertakings that committee took upon itself?
That's really a subcommittee of the Parks and Rec board. It would meet either right before or right after the Parks and Rec meeting, and we would, if necessary, dedicate land. It didn't happen very often, but that's what we would do. Review land requests or grants for trees, things along that nature.
When we first inquired to you about what your priorities were in Colleyville, yes, it appears that one of the first priorities had to do with parks and trails. Can you elaborate on that?
Absolutely. I think that the green spaces we have in Colleyville, including the parks and trails, are a big asset and what attracts many of the families here. But I also think there's room to improve them and grow them.
Let me ask you, rectify that or reconcile that with the issue on Glade Road, where they're talking about 10-foot trails on Glade Road. There's obviously going to decimate a lot of trees. So what is your compromise on trails versus that action?
I see the trails in Colleyville that exist right now between the parklands and along the railroad tracks, for instance, being the perfect place for trails. Some of the other streets like Glade, I think a sidewalk would be more appropriate, where we don't want to impact people's personal property and we want to be responsible with developing our community, so we don't need to use eminent domain to create trails for the city, and we want to make sure we preserve as many trees as we can.
In what instance would you say that eminent domain is reasonable?
I think eminent domain is reasonable when there's a public safety issue, and that may be an impact, a roadway that needs to be expanded in some way for public safety, but not just to make a larger sidewalk.
You thought that one of the issues needed to be the looking at the road deterioration in Colleyville. Is that true?
Absolutely. I know I drive John McCain a couple times a day, and it is literally slipping off the edges. It's an older road. I know the city's looking at different ways to rebuild the roads with concrete underneath and put the asphalt on top so that it will be in place and secure and a safe road for people. We don't have to make it a huge road to be safe.
What is your suggestions for John McCain as far as the width, how many lanes, etc.?
I think the width of John McCain is probably appropriate. It might need to be widened just slightly to make the space for the current size of the roads, but I think 2 lanes is probably appropriate.
Okay.
Not having done a traffic study myself.
I understand. You made a comment in here about your support for the first responders, and said we must continue to prioritize them and ensure they're well equipped and compensated. Can you elaborate on that for me?
Absolutely. I know one thing that keeps my family here and keeps many families here is how safe we are. There have been a couple of times when the alarm system at my house has gone off and I didn't know what caused it. The police met me at the house, and even though we thought it was a garage door that blew open, they walked through the house with me and made sure that I was safe. I really appreciate their responsiveness, and I know the fire department's been over at my neighbor's house when they've had emergency sprinklers go off accidentally, and they're really an asset to our community, and we need to make sure that they have what they need to stay safe. And
one of the big issues in last year's election had to do with transparency and the ability of citizens to give their input. So where do you come down on where we've changed or not changed since the last election?
Well, my feeling about city government is that we should be representatives of the community that we stand for. And so with that also goes listening to the community, whether it's at the meeting or outside of the meeting. I certainly think that citizens need the ability to communicate to council in public forums so that everybody can be aware of what they've said. And I appreciate that our current council and mayor are allowing people to do that. I think it's very important.
So you've been a council watcher for some time.
I have.
Right? Can you grade the current council over these last 2 years versus what was going on before, in your opinion?
In my opinion, I would grade them over the past year based on the change with the election, and then I would go from before that. Over the past year, I'd give them an A. They set out to make a number of changes, and they have accomplished those changes, including updating the city master plan and putting term limits in place, fixing the water bills. Before that, I think there was a real lack of transparency. Most of Colleyville didn't even know what we didn't know. We just knew things were changing and we weren't sure why.
So what is your personal stand on the density issue in Colleyville?
I think that there is a way to have smaller lots with preservation of green space, but I don't think that was done through the previous administration. I really love the larger lots and having single family homes that have enough land for people to play and have a horse if they want to. I think that's an asset to the community.
What have you been doing in the community to raise a level of awareness of Kathy Wheat?
Well, I've been out knocking on some neighbors' doors, new neighborhoods, not everybody that I know. I have been communicating with all of my friends and any organization that will have me. I'm happy to go and speak to them and get to know people. But really, I'm just trying to raise the awareness that I'm here hoping to do my best for Colleyville, and I want to hear what everybody has to say in that process. So
what was the driving motivation for you to go through this ordeal of running for office? So what in the world struck you to get you to take on this process?
Well, I would say, first of all, I didn't know what an ordeal it would be, but it's actually been a lot of fun. The main driver for me to get involved is that I am staying home with the kids right now, but I want to add the value that I have to offer to the community. And I see Colleyville as my long-term home, and I want to continue to develop that in a direction that I think the community wants. So I want to add my value there.
Kathy, your opponent in this race is Mr. John Bullock. Do you know John?
I've met John once.
Have you? Do you know enough about John's background? Do you know how you would contrast Kathy Wheat with your opponent at this point?
You know, the best contrast I can probably make to John Bullock and myself is that he raised his children in Colleyville and has been here for, I think, 30 years. I'm just beginning that journey of raising my children in Colleyville. So I think that I am part of the current generation that's forming what Colleyville will be for our children, and I think that's a really important voice.
Tell us what your values are, what you bring to the table, are, liberal, conservative, etc. Can you enlighten the public on that?
Absolutely. I consider myself a strong conservative, especially fiscally responsible. That's one of the things that brought my family and I back to Texas, is our conservative values and wanting to raise our family in an area that supports those values.